Kanye, what makes a person change? As I see you, we are passionate about responding to the questions of life and what's going on in the world at the minute. And if we really hope you find this talk useful and it gives you the opportunity to hear a bit about what Christianity is all about and who Jesus is. If you haven't already, help yourself to some food at the back and those drinks to fill your tummies for lunch. No matter what you believe, you are welcome here. And if you have any questions, we're going to check up a number on the board. You can ping some text in. If you have anything burning whilst the talk's going, just write it down, and then we'll do our best to respond to that afterwards. Now, Chris is here to answer the question today.
Hello.
Chris, who are you?
Hello.
Who are you?
Hello.
I can't hear you.
Chris, I'll kind of project. I am a staff worker, I work with the Christian Union here in Southampton and at Solent University. I'm also married to Juliet. She's a teacher in Portsmouth, and I am a Kanye fan.
So that's a yay, Kanye.
Kanye, indeed.
Go for it.
Great. Thanks, mate. Thanks so much for having me. It is genuinely a pleasure. Shall I speak through this one? Click that one. We'll try this. Try that. How's that? We'll try that. And we'll try that. Excellent. Wonderful. Let me start by just saying I am so excited to jump into this topic. It is something that I believe change, particularly, is something that is integral to what it means for us to be humans. Whether external or internal, I believe change is fundamental to what it means for us to be human. It's something that we long for in certain areas of our lives. It's something we refuse in other areas of our lives. And something that happens to us all, whether relational, psychological, political, financial, spiritual change. I'm sure we've all felt the desire for change, kind of that longing of Sam Cooke in his soulful chorus, "A change gonna come." And today we are looking at Kanye West. Kanye West's artistic journey has been a wild ride full of transition. He's arguably one of, if not potentially the most influential artist of the last 20 years. And he's certainly one of the most unpredictable. It's hard to predict what Kanye will say or do at any given moment. And in the past year, we've seen probably the most surprising turn yet, where Kanye has declared himself as a born-again Christian. His concerts are now gospel-infused Sunday services, and his new album, released just over a month ago, is a bold public statement. Jesus is King. So what do we make of Kanye's transformation? What has made this man who so arrogantly claimed to be divine to humble himself and now sing only about the God who he claims to serve? Is this transformation genuine? Some of those questions we're going to try and wrestle with. Some I can't answer. This won't be a comprehensive dissection of Kanye's career. It also probably won't be a psychological deep dive into what it means for humans to change. But whether you're a Kanye fan for life or have somehow never heard of him, hopefully there'll be something here for you, as we're going to look specifically at what drives us to change and put the Christian faith that Kanye has claimed he now follows under the microscope. So what's coming up is we're going to look closer at Kanye and his transformation. I want to share some lessons about growing plants, and then we're going to finish with my favourite story ever. As a society, we love a self-improvement story. I don't know if you've come across, but the self-help industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's the fastest growing sections of our bookstores, it's the fastest growing sections of wherever you get podcasts, and it is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. we love to hear from other people about how we can become more attractive, more intelligent, more smarter. That was intentional. We want to improve ourselves, basically, mentally, physically, emotionally, relationally. We want to be healthier. And it's obvious that we love to receive external voices in order for us to do that. These self-help gurus provide us with ideas and theories that help us understand and grow. And we love it, don't we? I love to scroll through my feed, and you don't have to look for long to find encouraging, inspirational messages. People encouraging one another on in their transformation. Or the most recent PB at a park run that somebody's achieved. We love to encourage one another in our goals. And I think Kanye's story is no different from that. Kanye's career began in production before he burst onto the scene with his 2004 album, College Dropout. Yet since Kanye's position within fame and stardom kind of started, he's always had a relationship or always been intertwined with criticism and controversy, whether because of strange public outbursts or because of wildly offensive lyrics. Recently, for example, this year, he sparked appropriate uproar by saying the slavery of African Americans for 400 years, quote, sounds like a choice. Kanye hasn't shied away from boasting in his success either. In his 2013 album, Yeezus, he included a track called I Am a God. In spite of his self-proclaimed God status, Kanye has struggled to find peace. His Yeezus follow-up, The Life of Pablo in 2016, opens with Ultralight Beam, with this line, but I'm looking for more. Some to feel safe and end my holy war. Kanye's been looking for more for most of his life, and he claims now to have found peace. See, I think we can affirm and commend Kanye's transformation without having to adhere or believe everything that he does. But I'd like to challenge the notion that this is just self-improvement. I'd like to challenge that sentiment that really is, what's good for you is good for you. What's good for me is good for me. What's good for Kanye is fine for Kanye. I think there are, first, before we get into that, some important questions to ask of the Christian faith. Is Christianity just a psychological crutch? Is it all just wish fulfillment? Is it all this Jesus talk, all just in Kanye's head? If you'll dive into some psychology with me briefly, and we'll have a look at Sigmund Freud, the Austrian thinker and philosopher who was one of the biggest proponents of this idea of God, Christianity in specifically, and as wish fulfillment. See, the assertion is that God only exists in the mind of his followers. And in fact, the thinking goes that those followers have created the idea of God out of a need for a father figure or out of need to justify their own existence. In his own words, he had this to say about religious beliefs. They are illusions, fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most urgent wishes of mankind. And he goes on. But can it really be explained away so easily by one aspect of psychology? Well, this argument of God as wish fulfillment cuts both ways. Couldn't we just as easily say that Freud and atheist thinkers just as much deny the existence of God out of their own personal need for no father figure to exist, as the returning argument goes? See, this argument proves nothing, and I think it leads us nowhere pretty fast. The problem is that we're asserting something, thinking that we are outside of external psychological factors. And so I think we can dismiss that pretty quickly. We have to then I think, listen and acknowledge the transformation that happens within those who choose to follow Jesus. And I'd like to suggest we should see it as evidence of a God who is real and offers something real today. You might still be asking, I hope you are, but Chris, is it real change? Is it actually real change that's happened to Kanye? Some of these over here. Did Kanye really change? I would say that's pretty even, if you can see that. Pretty evenly, there's about 20 or so for yes, maybe, and no. Across campus, seems like people are pretty divided. Whatever else we might say of Kanye's music and public persona, we can at least see his honesty and vulnerability. He knows he's not okay, and he doesn't hide that behind a PR facade. A few moments in Kanye's life seem to have particularly jolted him, poking holes in his otherwise unstoppable personality. In 2007, at the height of Kanye's fame, his beloved mother, Donda West, died from complications in plastic surgery. This tragedy sent Kanye into a really dark space and ended up creating the laments and quite twisted tracks on 808s and Heartbreaks. On Coldest Winter, and on that album, Kanye sings, "Goodbye, my friend. I won't ever love again, ever again." For Kanye and anyone who's here who might experience death closely, death really is the ultimate disturber. In 2013, another moment kind of broke through into Kanye's world, and when he had his first daughter, North. Among other things, this life-changing moment seemed to trigger a sort of moral awakening within Kanye. Kanye has often been criticised for his music's misogynistic depiction of women, and recently he's moved away from depicting women in sexually vulgar or obscene lyrics. In the last track of Ye in 2018, Violent Crimes, Kanye prays, "Father, forgive me. I'm scared of the karma because now I see women as something to nurture, not something to conquer." And so we move from Jesus to Jesus. Jesus is King. A remarkably worshipful collection of hip-hop psalms that captures who Kanye has become. A man solely focused on Jesus. Sonically, it's distinctly Kanye. It samples nostalgic, soulful records with layers of choirs and harmonies. It's distinctly more positive than many of his even more recent albums from the past year, Ye or Kids See Ghost. Lyrically, Kanye is of one focus, God. The opening track, Every Hour, begins with a Kanye-less choir repeating over and over, "Sing till the power of the Lord comes down." The whole album's straightforward lyrics communicate a rather refreshingly straightforward faith that wants to be shared with the world. I can't honestly answer, is this real change? I'm not sure any of us could. But in recent interviews, particularly if you've seen some with James Corden or Zane Lowe, it's been refreshing and quite eye-opening, I think, to see Kanye humbly open up about his deep needs, even in recent years. His mental breakdowns that at a number of times have led him to be hospitalized. His porn addiction. His relational breakdowns with family and other members. Kanye isn't claiming that he has been made perfect, or in fact that his life has been made perfect in any way. But as he shares kind of quite openly about continuing struggles. But I think what he's saying is that what he's found in Jesus is better than anything that he has found the world give him. Jesus is recorded as having said this, "I have come that you may have life and have it to the full." I would like to suggest that Christianity isn't just religious self-help, but at its core is a God who sent his Son to set us free, to bring us life. And that life is life in all its fullness. Jesus came specifically to do what we could never do, to free us from the problem of sin and death. To growing plants. My experience as a plant owner has been varied. I don't know if anyone can empathise in the room, but since getting married in the summer, I have gained kind of a lot more plants and gained responsibility of those, and I have a hit and miss kind of record when it comes to keeping plants alive. I'm not very good at regularly watering plants, but I have to say, on the whole, my aloe vera, pretty solid, succulents looking all right, and this one on the left, if you're particularly interested, is called a Calathea sunderiana. There you are. That is the diva of our bunch. It requires its leaves be sprayed twice a week. See, growth in my plants is actually, why you're confused of why I'm talking about plants, growth in my plants is fairly mathematical. When it gets down to it, it's a fairly mathematical formula. Water plus sun equals growth. A parallel plant story. My friend Leah once received a plant as a gift from one of her friends. It was a succulent, and she placed it pride of place on her windowsill. And for a whole year, while at university, Leah watered it meticulously every week, not missing a week. It took an entire year for Leah to realise that the plant wasn't real. She had been watering a plastic succulent without fail every week, and had always wondered why it never absorbed the water. I would like to suggest that in some way we are all aware of the functional things that need to happen for us to change, for us to grow. Whether that kind of allows us to then go on to strive for change or improvement is another thing. But I think in some ways we are also more like Leah's plastic succulent. If that plastic succulent is ever going to grow, even going to be able to absorb water, something miraculous is going to have to happen. Something supernatural is going to have to intervene. The pressing question, I think, of Christianity is it true? We must look at the evidence, the historical evidence found primarily in the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, or also called the Gospels. I think we must ask questions of the evidence and of the Christian faith itself, because if it's not true, then we Christians are to be pitied above all people for following a dead man. Questions that might have come up in your head as I'm speaking. Does God exist as a real person? And has he revealed himself to us? And if so, what has God said? Who was Jesus? I'd encourage you, if you have big questions or big things that you disagree with, I'd love it if you were to text in your questions. At the end, as Caleb said, I'll give some responses. Might not necessarily give an answer. I think it's helpful to give a response. But I'd encourage you, keep asking these big questions. I think it's important, even for myself, to ask the question, is it true? Because, in all honesty, I'd be an atheist if I thought it were true. As I continue to test my faith and continue to test my convictions, what I've found is that I become more convinced that Jesus is who he claimed to be, and the love he offers is real. So this is where my favourite story ever told comes in. Jesus spent a lot of his time with people a lot like Kanye, people who knew the reality of their own mess. There's a bit in one of the biographies of Jesus' life where Luke the historian says this: the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. A bit of historical context there. First century Israeli society is a lot like ours today. It was highly moralistic. There were some crimes or sins which, if you've done, that is totally unforgivable. You can't shake the shame from it. Tax collectors, particularly, were ultimate public enemy number one. They were even, in fact, working with the enemy, the Roman government, and were often taking a little bit off the top for themselves. They were totally unforgivable. Luke kind of gives us this other group of people, this kind of generic group of sinners, people who also had been guilty of doing something that had led them to feel totally unforgiven and culture to cast them off as blacklisted. These are people who know they have done bad things to people and hurt others, and yet they cannot get enough of Jesus. The way that he treats them, the way that he talks to them, they're all gathering round to hear. In fact, Jesus is getting quite a lot of judgment from the morality police of the day about how openly he's welcoming these people in. So you've got this crowd with the morality police at the back, judging, and the people at the front, guilty and knowing that they are filled with shame. And Jesus tells them this story. He says to them, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the youngest son went to his father and said, "Father, give me my inheritance now." Basically what he's saying is, "Dad, I don't want you to live, don't want to live with you anymore, and don't really care if you live or die. Just want your stuff. So sell your land and give it to me, and I'll get out of here." Wouldn't that have hurt the father? But Jesus says the father doesn't fly off the handle and kick the son out with nothing, but he says yes. He sells the land, he gives them the money, and he lets them go. The son goes and he gets as far away as he can from home, and he spends his money living it up. All the things he couldn't do when he was at home, you name it, parties, prostitutes, whatever. But then his money starts to run out, and he notices that his friends start to disappear too. He finds himself with nothing to eat, so hungry in fact, that as he's working on a farm, even the slop being fed to the pigs seems appealing. Eventually he thinks to himself, maybe I should just go home. At least the servants at home have enough to eat. There's no way I could ever go back and rejoin the family, but because of what I've done to my dad, but perhaps he'll let me come back as a servant. So he starts the long walk home. He's broken, he's ashamed, he's outcast. But Jesus says that while he was still a long way off, the father ran to him. The father was waiting for him, standing there every day, watching, waiting, and hoping that his son would come home. And when he sees him, he hitches up his robe and he runs, and he doesn't care that everyone in the village is pointing and laughing at him. When he gets to him, he wraps him in a big hug, kisses him on the forehead, looks him in the eyes. And just at that point, the son starts his rehearsed apology. "Father, I have sinned against you." Without even being able to continue, the father interrupts him. He just calls to his servants, says, "Bring my best robe and bring my son his dignity back. Bring the family ring, so that everyone knows that this is my son, and he has come home. Bring some sandals, because his feet must be killing him. Then go, get the biggest, best animal that we've got, because we need to celebrate. Because this is my son, whom I love, who was lost, but now is found." Jesus kind of looks up at this crowd, the morality police at the back, and those guilty, feeling guilty and shameful at the front. And no one can miss what he's saying. He's saying, this is what God is like. And more than that, he's saying, this is what I've come to do. This is who I am. I am God, running to you, to meet you in all your mess and guilt and shame. I'm God, running out to look you in the eyes and say, I love you, I want you to come home. Jesus is saying that God loves you. That is the claim of the Christian faith. Is it true? Well, as I said, we must take seriously the evidence. And one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, I think, is the evidence of transformed lives. God promises to redeem the broken, guilty, and ashamed. And then there are many other than Kanye who have claimed that God has done just that for them today. Perhaps you have a friend or family member who you've seen the impact of their faith in their life. I think of my friend Justin, who was traumatized through years of service in the military, came back from 6 years in Afghanistan with tremendous PTSD. Took him years and years and years searching for meaning and hope and purpose, really, to settle, to find actually all the hope he needed in Jesus. There are loads of other examples, and I'm going to skip through them. But I just want to draw my talk to a close before we have some questions. What can make a person change? The really unhelpful answer is a lot of things make us change. I think we change ourselves all the time to become healthier, more organised, better at working more efficiently. And I think at times we need change. But I don't think we need to get to the bottom of ourselves in order to do that. What often changes us is finding a better way. It's never a bigger no that will compel us to transform, but a better yes. I believe that the best and biggest transformable yes on offer to us is the Christian God. The God who runs to us in the person of Jesus Christ and says, I've come that you may have life to the full. So, where do we go from here? Perhaps you have considered some of the evidence of Christianity. Perhaps you'd like to kind of make a step closer to kind of committing yourself to Jesus. Well, I'd love to chat to you if that is you. Or I'd encourage you, why not go along to a local church? Perhaps you've still got questions. That's a wonderful place to be in. And I would encourage you, keep asking questions. Ask questions of your Christian friends, ask them of your Christian family, of anyone. Keep asking questions. And wherever you're at, I'd love to encourage you to take a look at one of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. At the back, we have copies. They're called Uncover Mark. I don't have one. That was me posing with a fake one. And I'd love to give that to you as a gift. The Christian Union here would love to give you those as a gift. I found that when I opened that one of the Gospels up for the first time and looked at the person of Jesus for myself, I found that if this is what God is like, then I need to find out more. I have to look further into this. Thank you so much for listening. I will kind of take a short break. In fact, I'll hand over to Caleb, sorry. But yes, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Chris. Now, we'd love to give you the opportunity just to chat with each other about that. And if you have any questions, the number was and will be up on the screen. So send them in and, yeah, Chris will do his best to respond to those. Thank you so much. Very outspoken about his views on religion. Why do Christians seem so obsessed with talking about Jesus all the time?
About Jesus or about Kanye?
Why are Christians so obsessed with talking about Jesus?
About Jesus. That's a great question. Why are Christians so obsessed with talking about Jesus all the time? Well, the short answer is there would be nothing to the Christian faith if it wasn't for Christ. The very centre point, and the reason I encourage you and point you towards the evidence of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, is it all rests, I believe, upon the real events of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We have to kind of look at those events specifically, and if they happened, then we have to do something about that. And I think it's quite eye-opening to kind of look in and see and to digest some of that information for yourself as well. So I would encourage you, again, if I'm another Christian encouraging you to look towards Jesus Christ. I think he's a far better person to follow than Kanye West, more consistent, much more wholesome, perhaps, but he is God himself. That's who he claimed to be. And so that is really why we as Christians are very keen about pointing people to look for themselves, uncover, who do you say, who do you think Jesus was? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Next one. Do you think Kanye is alienating people and some of his fans by being so vocal about his supposed newfound faith? Why doesn't he keep it to himself? Or at least be more private with it? And what's your favourite Kanye album?
Okay. Favourite Kanye album is controversially 808s and Heartbreaks. Dismiss that. We can argue about that after. But I think it's a great question. Is Kanye alienating people? I think the critics' response to this most recent album would say yes. In that people seem to be kind of reacting against it, and it doesn't fit with the narrative that we have for Kanye. We love to watch Kanye. He's a character. He's got the biggest ego we know of any celebrity, and so we're never quite sure what he's going to do. And I think what you're starting to see is kind of the beginnings of a man who's seeking to humble himself, to be more humble, and to communicate what he believes is the best thing that he's ever found. I think we have to take note, don't we? I think that's a big part of why we're here and why it's fun to kind of look a little bit closer at Kanye and his transformation. Is because I think he's found something in it so radical, this transformation, that I'm not sure we could explain it any other way. I'm interested in that question. I think there's loads more we could say on whether he's alienating people musically and lyrically, but I think in terms of content, perhaps there is a reaction. Perhaps people weren't quite ready for Jesus as King. They definitely, I don't know if people saw last night, Kanye also announced that he's going to do a Nebuchadnezzar Kanye West hip-hop opera. Not hip-opera, let me get that right. An opera. So I'm not sure we're ready for that either, but we'll see. That's quite exciting thing, is that Kanye is still Kanye. He's still slightly wild, interesting, eccentric, creative, talented. He just now says that he's following Jesus. Yeah.
We got another. Christians seem obsessed with talking about change. Why would I want to change? And if I do, what happens if nothing changes?
A great question. Thank you for that question. I think I would encourage you that change, particularly from the Christian perspective, I think it's a little bit like marriage. As I said, got married, and nothing can prepare you for how wonderful it's going to be. The day itself, the moment itself, the build-up all kind of prepares you and fills you with excitement, and it's wonderful. It's also pretty odd. Let me just kind of make that clear in a wonderful way. The reason it's odd is that there's something so unique about that moment. As you kind of greet people as the groom, and then you sit down and you wait for the bride, and the beautiful bride walks in, and you get to the point where you are pronounced husband and wife. In that moment, nothing changes. I didn't turn blue. I didn't suddenly get magical husband powers. But also, in another sense, everything had changed. The rest of my life has changed in a whole different direction. And so I guess that hopefully paints a little bit of what I think the transformation and change available in Jesus is like. That there is hope and peace and love on offer. It's a process in many ways, much more than it is an instantaneous thing. It's a journey of choosing to commit and follow Jesus and believe that what he said is true is true. Thank you for that question. That's great.
We've got time for one more.
Yep.
How are you sure that Kanye has really changed and it's not just an act?
Well, that is a good question. The honest answer is, well, we're not ever entirely sure. Kanye himself, in his most recent interview with Zane Lowe, said, "You've heard me tell you about the influences of high fashion on my life. You've heard me tell you about what Hennessy has had for my life, and now I'm here to tell you about what Jesus Christ has done for me." He talks about, in the same sentence, how who was a slave, now set free. I think the reason this is different is this isn't fitting with the kind of power trajectory that we could perhaps see Kanye on. The ego-swallowing kind of all areas of business, fashion, music, artistry involved Kanye. This is a man who, even the first track on his album doesn't feature him. This is a man who I think is seeing that he isn't God and has needed to humble himself. So I would say, I think there is loads of evidence, and I'd point you to kind of have a look at some of the videos and the interviews particularly of what him unpacking a little bit of his transformation. Because I do think there's something striking, there's something unique, there's something that we've not seen happening in this man. And I'm excited. I will always be excited to see what Kanye does, and this Nebuchadnezzar opera, we shall see what that is like. But yeah, thank you for those questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, we've loved unpacking this question with Chris, and I hope you have too. If you've got more questions and you want to find out more about Jesus' life, yeah, go for it. Grab an Uncover mark at the back, and if you want to unpack that more, we've got something called a coffee and chat. There are flyers at the back for it, where you can go and meet with someone and just unpack what Jesus' life was all about, which, I mean, I'd highly recommend. And so yeah, thank you for your questions. If you would like to come along to any more events, there are loads of other flyers at the back for things we have coming up. Yeah.
Carol service?
Carol service. On the 1st of December, we have 4 carol services. So if you can't make it to one, you have a very busy day. So I recommend getting in the Christmas spirit. It will be amazing. And to hear about the real meaning of Christmas and why we celebrate it so much in this country. Lastly, there are feedback forms you'll have seen on your seats. We'd love to build upon this event, and if you could write down your thoughts on this, we'd love to see if we can do this better. And if you could put your contact details, we'd love to keep in touch with you. Thank you so much for coming, and have a great day.
Right.